No, which is cool because I feel like I mean, you guys know I don't enjoy talking and then on a public platform. So
well, you're apparently everyone's favorite. Not me.
Good.
Not Hermione. Yeah.
Well, that's good. Yeah, because that's basically what I say after every single podcast. Yes, we didn't have enough Trevin.
Welcome to Tabletop Talk. Today we are actually going to be going over the new rule changes coming up in D&D. Ooh! Yeah, so everyone's here today. We've got Dr. RPG, give us a hi.
Hello.
And we've got, of course, Rick the Man.
Hello.
We have Jeremy.
Hello.
And then your forever DM, Kyle, here. So, yeah, how are you guys feeling about this topic? I know we actually did a little more research for this episode and such.
No, they can't know that we actually do research.
Nope. This is all off the cuff, on the fly. No prior knowledge or setup.
Look, I was trying to play it smooth, man. I know we didn't actually research it.
I will say I'm actually really looking forward to this. Having never played an edition or version of D&D prior to 5e, seeing my first core change, I think is going to be. I'm really excited for it.
Okay.
Jeremy and I watched a couple videos from the folks over at Wizards that dove into this and really spearheaded it. Just from a logistical standpoint, the art that's going to be in the new core books is going to look super cool.
I have mixed opinions, but we'll get into that later.
But I'm excited to see how playing will change, because I have not played 3.5, anything like that. I've only ever played 5e, so to have something that consequentially changes how we play, I'm excited for it.
I'll be honest, I think half the time I forget that only me and Jeremy have played a few other editions.
Yeah, and honestly, most of my time has been spent with 5e.
Yeah.
Which, makes sense because of our age, but most of my time has been spent with 5e, and I'm also very excited, but I like when new editions of things come out. I like when new variations come out, just because I like to test out changes. And I like to change it up. It's why a lot of times I feel like I get a little stale with a character and want to switch characters, It's just because I think it's about time. This is going to be very interesting because they're adding, it's going to be the largest core rulebook to date, the player's handbook, and the amount of changes that they could do is interesting. So I'm excited to see everything that they do.
Yeah, and to kind of follow up on that, I'm excited because I dove into the history of it and seeing how D&D has evolved, where it came from in its early roots. It's really cool. I'm definitely excited for this episode as well.
Yeah, no, I'm excited for a whole different reason. Jeremy's already looking at me like he knows what I'm talking about.
Kyle's already holding his spear and he's ready.
I'm just ready to put this thing in the fire. But most of my games were originally 3.5, and I dabbled in 4e, and now I mostly play 5e. I think 5e is great, but a lot of the changes I'm not liking because of prior changes. I kind of see where the future is going with the game, so I have a lot of opinions on it. So there's a reason I took the section I wanted. Jeremy, did you want to announce kind of the order we want to run this one?
Yeah, so today's podcast, we're not going to be diving very deep into the core rulebook. Instead, what we're going to do is today is the first of a series of podcasts where we are going to tell you all the changes that we know about. And today, we're going to first start out with Dr. RPG giving us a brief history of Dungeons & Dragons editions. Then we will move over to Kyle, who's going to explain to us, is this 5e? Is it like 5e? Is it different than 5e? What can we play with it? And then we're going to move to me, who's going to tell you where to find information about this. And then last, we're going to finish off with Rick, who's going to lead us into some purchases, which is why we finish off with him.
And then we'll probably finish off with producer Chris telling you to follow and review and rate the podcast.
Yeah.
All of the things.
Follow,
All the
rate,
things.
review, comment,
There we go.
send money.
Subscribe. What's what YouTube, right?
Yeah.
Donations. Link in description.
Sponsorships, all the good stuff.
Yeah, and the send money you don't really have to worry about if you don't know where we live. It's to the friends who are listening right now. We are pushing out this content for you. You know where we live. You drop off a 20, 100. I mean,
Anthony gave us a whole table. What have you guys done so far?
I mean, we really,
Sorry, I'm really good at playing bad cop to the point it's more detrimental.
yeah, seriously, Anthony only gave us a table.
Well, he also gave us a speaker cabinet that's going to hold the wiring, and
no, we're trying to trick Anthony into giving us more stuff.
I mean, we'll take anything, even like third-party post-dated checks. We'll do it. I'm not above that.
That's off the record. Okay, well, on that note, Dr. RPG, why don't you lead us off?
So, the history of D&D. So, to start at the beginning, we got to go back to the early 1970s. And so, at this time, what was around wasn't RPGs. It was mostly war games, was tabletop war games. And one of the popular ones created by actually co-created by Jeff Perrin and Gary Gygax, who we know would go on to be one of the
praise the name Gygax.
Praise the name.
All hail Gygax!
They created a game called Chainmail, and Chainmail was kind of similar. I didn't dive super into it, but kind of similar to Warhammer 40k, and it was more like historical battles, if I'm to understand it correctly. And then what happened then, Gary went on to publish that, but he expanded it. All of his friends were big into fantasy. They loved the Jack Vancian Dying Earth series, which I had not heard of. That was a big the word we look for. They use that as to
inspiration.
Thank you. Yeah, that and and so anyways, he actually created a 15-page supplement to Chainmail, and you saw him incorporate a lot more of the fantasy elements, the Tolkien-esque elements, like we've begun to see early versions of dragons and trolls, and this is actually when heroes were added, and also the morality alignment system was actually taken from a book, 3 Hearts and 3 Lions, also added to my Audible list, by Paul Anderson, which was really cool. And this is the first time that we saw wizards making their spells. We saw first appear here spells such as haste, polymorph, protect from evil. So later on, let's fast forward. Gary Gygax was hired. Sorry, I have like a whole thing of notes in front of me. Was hired by a Guidon Games in 1969, and he worked with a guy named Dave Arneson, who would also go on to become one of the co-creators of D&D. And they met in 1969, both working for Guidon Games, and they were actually working together to develop a naval warfare game. But both of them, kind of on the side, had made their own games that incorporated more of an RPG setting. Arneson had the game Bronstein and Blackmore. A fun note: Blackmore would actually go on to be D&D's first campaign setting, and Gary Gygax worked on a game called Greyhawk. I might be getting the timeline a little bit mixed up. There's a lot to this.
It sounds pretty
okay.
accurate. Only reason I know is I have D&D Trivial Pursuit, and these were some of the questions that stumped me, and I had to go study.
And it's cool that I so going on to the evolution, so war games, it would be 1 versus 1. You would take the role of a general, and then you would have a referee. Well, eventually with these games, like Bronstein, you saw roles start to be incorporated that weren't just a military general. You could be a baker, a mayor, and so you started to see those RPG elements take a play. And Gary Gygax loved this. He was like, "This is amazing." And you start to see the referee kind of this was the early version of what a dungeon master would become with these war game referees.
This naval game, you could be a baker?
Yeah, a game, and in Bronstein, a baker, a mayor.
That's what I'm talking about.
Yeah, that is awesome.
Because naturally, you make a loaf of sourdough, and then you go out to the high seas, and you take your battleship, and you shoot torpedoes.
Look,
No, the sourdough is on the high seas.
Yeah, true.
The mother is
Dude,
on the high seas.
Have
It's
you
rocking
ever had
back and forth.
a loaf of stale bread thrown at your head? It's like a rock.
Yep.
PETA
early
knew what he was
cannonballs.
doing in the Hunger Games. You saw his decoration skills even. No.
These are ideas for my next character. Baker. I love it. Love to see it.
Glad to help.
So Arneson and Gygax would actually pitch a new game to Guidon, and a game. The game was actually just called Dungeon. Guidon Games didn't like it. They weren't going to do it, and Gary Gygax was like, no, this. He had the vision that this was going to be the future, so he went and developed a Greyhawk by himself, but still staying in touch with Dave Arneson. They would go on to create this, and then D&D was then Gary Gygax made his own company, TSR, Tactical Studies Rules, and under TSR, D&D released their first version in 1974 under the white box, because everything came in this white box. And what was kind of crazy is the white box had 3 booklets: player manual, monster and loot manual, and adventure building. But this was such in its primitive age, they actually incorporated the game chainmail. That they just plopped that in there too, because you needed both. You needed for the battles, you needed some of chainmail's rules, and so it was kind of cool. And for the players that didn't have a chainmail, Gary Gygax then developed the THACO, or the to hit armor class 0 rule, which that was kind of opposite of what you would think. To hit an armor class 0, if I'm understanding it right, this was way before me. You need to roll higher, because armor class 0 was like
if you're understanding it right.
Yeah.
No, it's a very difficult thing to understand THACO.
Well, no, it's a great that he's looking at me, because I'm letting you read off the timeline here, but a lot of this stuff I've just known from all the hobbies I've done since I was little. So I'm sure there's a few OG players out there right now going like, yep, because I know this rule actually made it all the way to 3rd edition, and so why the rules are so complicated in many of the early editions.
Yeah, so it was it was just a constant evolution. And talking about art earlier, if you go back and look at I go and Google art from the D&D 1st edition, it's like you can see marks where they were obviously like tracing from comic books. Like, it's awesome.
You won't be disappointed.
It's super
one way or
primitive.
another, you won't be disappointed.
It has really evolved. And then they only had 3 classes at the time. You had Fighting Man, which could equip the best weapons and armor, and that's what they did. They fought the magic users, an early version of the wizard, super squishy in the beginning. You had to pretty much babysit them, could only use 1 spell, and with the way they made characters, you had a chance of making a wizard that only had 1 HP. Just super dangerous.
Oh my gosh.
It was a different time. Then the last class was a cleric, kind of a mix between a magic user and a fighting man. And then this would go on to be published under Wizards of the Coast, which became then a subsidiary under Hasbro since '97. And then you would see in 1977 you would see basic D&D and advanced Dungeons and Dragons. Those are 2 different versions. Basic D&D kind of more geared towards getting the younger audience and kids into it, but AD&D would be the one that would take would go on to become all the editions of D&D that we know. And then you have 3.0, which dropped in 2000. 2003 is when we saw 3.5, which this was the start of the D20 system. 2008 you saw 4th edition, and 2014 was the release of 5th edition. And 2017 to 2018 is when you saw the huge spike, where we had 12 to 15 million D&D players in North America alone. So you start to see it hit,
Just a few.
it really blow up. And
It's a very minor growth, but
and please, and I encourage anyone to correct me if I got anything wrong. What I pulled from was from a YouTube channel from DM et al. Also articles from the Seattle Times and some Vanity Fair. So I tried to not use Wikipedia. I tried to make sure I was citing everything. But if anything's wrong, yeah, please correct me. This might not be 100%, but
it's from my own studies. I would say, yeah, that's actually
close.
more accurate than I would have given it. But obviously, if there's anywhere you can comment or review, feel free
please
to
correct
let
me.
us know if any of us get any of this mixed up. It's our usual source for things. So.
I also love the millennial blood in you. That's like I didn't just use Wikipedia because
God.
we have to.
within our age group of this podcast, when we were in high school, Wikipedia was a bloodbath of where there was no resources. You didn't have to cite anything, and our teachers just you can't use it. You can't use it. You can't use it. Now it's got resources forever, and it's got links that
It's
you
a
can
lot better.
actually use it.
Yeah.
It's a real.
That's because their
encyclopedia.
teacher got
It's
it.
very good.
Yeah, it's a real resource now because here's the thing. It's got a 7. You click on 7. There's the source for it.
Exactly.
Well, and
Perfect.
that actually happened because of legal issues.
Yeah.
They were having that exact same problem where the fact anybody could go on and change things.
You mean someone could go on there and say that Sean Connery won the Stanley Cup 7 years in a row,
Wait, he
over and
didn't?
over and over again until your account got banned.
That
from
sounds
Wikipedia,
that sounds like a,
sounds like a
a personal story.
Yeah.
Of course not. Absolutely not.
No. And remember, everyone, if you want to go ahead and give us a correction or comment, probably the easiest way that I think to give us a comment is leave a 5-star review of this podcast.
Yep.
And with your note and correction, and if you cite your source, we will give you praise on our next podcast. We will mention your username pending appropriateness.
I was going to say
Pending appropriateness.
And keeping in mind, it may technically be an episode or 2 down the line. Depends when we get it and versus such.
This is all a potentially false promise, but nonetheless, leave that 5-star review.
Oh, jeez. I don't know how I'm meant to lead off of that.
Oh yeah, Kyle, you're up now.
Yeah, so mine is not going to be as well laid out as Dr. RPG, but we look to Dr. RPG usually for kind of solidified facts and cool breakthroughs on things. We listen to me because I will make you listen to my opinion. So I have been doing a lot of research on the rule changes and such, and I'm not going to go into super detail because some of this stuff I know they are still working through. It's in kind of playtest mode, and a lot of it is this is where we're leaning, and you hear a lot from YouTubers like Ginny D, Dungeon Dudes, and a bunch of other people already have covered some of the new releases. Most of it is probably confirmed, but until the source material comes out, I'm going to just, even the stuff I've heard directly from Wizards of the Coast, I'm going to treat it as this is what we know for now. So as for the difference between it and 5th edition, I notice a significant change in the rules, specifically when it comes to races, classes, and abilities, as well as backgrounds. Some of these changes I think are good. Most I'm not a fan of, but again, I started back in 3.5, so just knowing what the game is to me and what I think it is to a lot of the older players out there who've been playing since early editions, we're the guys you're probably hearing the most complaining about these changes. So a good thing is they are actually adding some new official races into this new edition. They are going to be adding Azamar and Goliath and Orc as the new ones. So I'm a big fan of the idea of adding the Azamar and the Goliaths in there, because I think Goliaths are a popular one. I think Azamar, they get a pretty bad rep for them. I know not a lot of people like to play them, but they are meant to kind of be the counterpoint to tieflings. So for those of you who don't know what an Aasimar is, it's essentially someone with holy heritage. So like celestial, either an angel or a god, like resides in their bloodstream.
Yeah, it's basically that you're playing Dr. RPG in a RPG.
Yeah, pretty much.
Closest to celestial we know.
And of course, we've got the Goliaths, which I think that's great to have them as an initial thing on there. And I apologize. The studio pug's been going crazy on the stairs. I'm sure that our producer will get most of it out of there, but for the stuff that gets through, we apologize on Odin's behalf, because he will not. Goliaths have been added. A lot of players already really liked them, but of course, the role became much more significant after Critical Role's Travis Willem playing Grog really brought to light how fun a Goliath can be. The only one of these three I'm not as happy about is Orc. And there's been a lot of historical changes from the editions on how we view a lot of alignments when it comes to the races, or what is now being turned into species. And I will say, I do think that is a more appropriate title for it. I think races sounds more fantasy, but in reality, species, I would agree with the change they are making in the book for that.
Yeah, sounds
I think that's
right.
a fair trade on there, so that's one of the things that's good. But why I'm not a fan of the orc thing is similar to some of the changes they're going to be doing with the drow. I've noticed that we're having this lean towards removing alignment, and each edition has slowly removed it. It started off with the chaotic evil all the way up to lawful good, but that system got dropped for 5th edition because they didn't feel like it was fair to the players to have to force an alignment on you. Personally, I kind of liked the idea that you had these alignments and it was kind of a good moral standing, and there you couldn't get away with then being the guy who is a murder hobo and still trying to justify why you're allowed good benefits.
That's our entire audience, Kyle.
I think it's some of our audience, but there's a lot of people who have played with that player that just does things that's like, if this were a real person, how would you say you killing that orphan just because of the coin? Why would you not consider yourself evil? And all. I've had a few players argue that, no, that's just what their character would do. And it's like, that's fine, but that doesn't make it morally right. And all. Moving on from there, where I'm going with this is I'm noticing with a lot of the races and classes, everything's getting moved almost towards, and you Pathfinder fans out there can correct me on this, but it feels like we're moving towards Pathfinder. D&D was originally a game that was like hardcore adventure survival. But as the editions have gone on, it's been easier and easier to make broken characters. And when I say broken, I mean, right now we just started a game, and last night we ran it, and Rick's character got a +5 for, like, his attack. We are only starting at level 2. In, like, if you were to go back to, like, 3.5, that's probably the highest stat you have on the whole thing. But in 5th edition, it's so easy naturally. You don't have to look up all the guides that are out there, but it's a lot easier to make your character OP. You're going to get more often the rolls that it works to beat it, and there's ways to counteract that, but I'm noticing with the classes and the races that they're almost streamlining everything into everyone's amazing at everything. And I think you start to miss the point of D&D, which is usually a group effort. And I think maybe it could have been COVID that has caused some of these changes, that we've been seeing people come up with ways to play D&D in shorter groups, by yourself even. But Gygax and them clearly were setting up something that was meant to be with their buddies and such.
Do you think that the everybody can do anything is geared more towards like full playability, or do you think it's geared more for attracting a newer player?
I think it's designed in a way that, to me, it feels like some of the people who loved min-maxing and such are now in charge of making the rules, and they're not catching the point in why there's the weakness. That sometimes the fun in D&D is the failure. The failure can be just as fun as the success, but I feel like we live in a world now that you get instant gratification for everything. If you want something, you go on Amazon. If you want to watch a show and you don't want commercials, you pay a little extra. And I feel like D&D is slowly turning into that, and we're losing the point of what makes the journey fun. It's the fact you did something extremely difficult with people that become close to you and hopefully around the table are your actual friends. You're making a story. The Fellowship isn't great because they destroy the ring. It's great because of the hardships that it takes to destroy the ring.
That's a fantastic segue for us to totally pivot gears and now spend the next 6 hours talking about what each character of the Fellowship represents in the human journey.
Oh, gee.
And then an additional 6 hours talking about which one of the Fellowship would be our friend and why. Like, who would be at our wedding? Who would you be marrying from the Fellowship? Who would
Sam.
be your best man?
I'm sorry, I'd be marrying Sam.
Who would be the ring bearer?
Like, like, don't get me wrong. Aragorn would be my first pick, but Sam would be like the one I'd go for.
Gosh dang it, Kyle! I did a slow setup to the ring bearer, and you couldn't even laugh at it.
I couldn't. So going quickly, I guess I just was giving my quick take, so my opinions make sense as I line these up. I feel we're seeing things becoming a little too overpowered in a way that's like, yeah, that's fun, but how are you going to fail anything if you get, like, right off the bat, a +10 to any roll?
Do you think seasoned players will make that change to doing that, or do you think seasoned players will see this as, hey, that's a new thing I can do, but I like to play how 5 has always been, so I'm going to continue this?
I think we're going to see a lot... I think we're going to see kind of a 50-50 divide down the board. Based on these rules. I see a lot of people who've been promoting it, but I've also heard a lot of people point out that Wizards has been reaching out to groups like us and others who cover this subject and have been paying them to promote the material, which at the end of the YouTube videos, they do show that it's sponsored by Wizards of the Coast, but there were a few others. I'm not going to name names because I'm not trying to point fingers on anyone, and the point of it isn't.
He's pointing directly at me and Rick right now. Not Dr. RPG for some reason.
I will say, folks like us, not at all true. It's the folks that, like, even your friends that don't play D&D, they know their podcast names.
Yeah, like
those are the folks that are doing that.
Yeah, I'm talking more. I'm talking some more of the bigger names. But there's a few other channels that haven't quite reached that I still watch, because I watch a lot of up-and-coming channels, just curiosity, you never know what's out there. So the reason I'm not a fan of orcs being in this is not because of the change in history. We can do a whole thing on that later. I've made my opinion on where I think that's going. That's probably something I can do a whole side thing on later. But as for the orcs, it's because they are now removing half races. So there will not be half elves, there will not be half orcs. And I'm personally just kind of not a fan of that, because I think that's a fun little edgy twist on there. Like, I get it's not necessary, but the fact we're kind of moving orcs in the same way we've moved drow from they used to be just a naturally evil race to all of a sudden, no, orc society is like normal society. And it's like, well, no, I love the idea that they're brutes, because that makes it more fun when someone wants to play a good orc character. Now, if they're just all good, that's not unique. Driz Do'Urden isn't cool because he's a drow. He's cool because he's the only good drow for the longest time. He's the only one who breaks free from, well, the Spider Queen's embrace over the whole race. Or species, I guess now. But, so, I'm not a fan of the fact we're removing the half races, and with that, I'm not a fan of the fact that now species will not determine your ability score, like improvements. So beforehand, and other players will know that currently, if you were to pick like a Dragonborn, I believe you get a +2 in strength and a +1 in Constitution. You can correct me, but the point being, every race kind of had a bonus of some kind and a few extra special rules. You'll no longer be getting that ability through your species. You'll be getting it through your background. And while I do think, like, I see where the thought process is there, I don't like the idea of it coming from your background, because usually a lot of people are pretty good at role-playing and putting their stats to line up how they want it to. And the background has been a cool idea they've introduced here into 5th edition. I like it, but I feel we're starting to go too heavy into that. And we apologize, we didn't give a heads up, but this is the show is we're starting to run the episodes a little longer than the 30 minutes we used to do. Just as we're getting into a little deeper topics and bigger things.
Surprised you get to deal with us a little bit more than usual.
Speaking of 30 minutes.
There we go. The producer's been like, oh, we're past the 30-minute mark, you guys, and all. But no, where I'm going with that is just, I understand where they're going with it, but I think they're putting too much focus on the background, because my issue with the background is the majority of players start as a young adult. Not everybody. I've mentioned on the show, I like to play older characters sometimes that have already gone through a lifetime of something, and now they're in a lifetime of something else. However, with that, I feel you're going to get less things from your races, which has been noted, but they've changed up a few of the rules, and one of the ones I'm enjoying that's a new one so I've said a lot of things I didn't like so far, and why I don't like it. But one of the good things I think they're changing is for the dwarves, their stone cutting is no longer going to be, oh, you get advantage on history checks with stones and stuff that's like, unless your DM specifically wrote out a thing like, oh, you're all dwarves, so this will be useful. I'll have tons of hidden things for you. It didn't come into play. So they've changed it now to where dwarves basically are able to see using their feet. So they count as long as they're on solid ground, as they can be blinded and they can spot invisible creatures just through the sensitivity of the ground. I don't have the actual rule pulled up. It's one of the changes that I think there are a few cool new ones I've seen in there. But then there's a few others, like the walking speed. They're changing that on everyone, so everybody moves 30 feet now. Halflings and dwarves and gnomes no longer move 25 feet. I understand, like, we're trying to, but again, I think we're making everything too much. It doesn't matter what you are. It's all just flavor now. Whereas before, it was kind of fun, the idea that, man, what species should I pick? This species is good at this, but this species is really good at this. And I like playing a rogue, so should I be a tabaxi or a kenku or a halfling? What would be my best choice? I obviously won't be this. And I feel like you lose that whole point when you remove that from the races and the classes, because I've noticed the classes are also losing some of these abilities, and it's going more towards your background. But as a game where you're moving forward and your background is not usually implied aside from a bit of roleplay sense, and a couple of extra special rules, like with being the guild artisan, you're able to get special deals through merchant guilds and such, as long as you have your deed. With like the scholar, I believe you get like, I don't remember it off the top of my head, but we're seeing a lot of now it feels to me everything is getting blended into, it doesn't matter, everyone's the same, and I'm not a fan of that, because the cool thing in every fantasy novel and movie is, whoa, did you see the elves? They were so fast and like so light, they're jumping on everything. Yeah, but did you see the dwarves? They were barreling in there, and it was just like they're knocking guys left and right in the Battle of Five Armies, and you don't get to see that uniqueness anymore. I think once you make everyone special, nobody's special.
I feel like we're probably still going to see a bunch of uniqueness in this one. I just want to put that out there, because there still are going to be a bunch of different species, classes, subclasses, different abilities that you can do. And I don't think it's all just going to be bland malto meal, or you know what I mean, like cream of wheat.
Yeah, and like I said, I think just because the option is there, I don't think every player's going to take those.
Oh no, I'm aware of that, but
tons of folks that are going to be like, sure, I can do this. But a lot of players are really big into the history, like the actual core of their character, and they're going to say, even though that's there, I'm sticking by what this character.
I'm not arguing that it can't be, but from what I'm watching, is as someone who's come from 3.5, where the rules were very different,
it opens the door
each of them, I'm watching the rules always get easier and easier for the players at the detriment of what makes the game unique. It is turning into almost Pathfinder, which is a game designed for you to be the ultimate badass out there. Pathfinder is like D&D, but superhero edition. You're meant to go and wreck huge things. Dungeons of the Dragons always had the implication you could die at any moment and all.
Is it maybe just like the evolution of sports, where the current evolution of sports is to get more high-scoring games? Football, basketball, baseball, rules and things are meant to be now faster and more high-scoring than they were in the past. And you have people who are defensive old heads who are super frustrated that they've lost their game and that the game is going to the masses who like high-scoring and fast pace.
And that is because of the audience watching. And I think that is kind of why I've been asking you, like, do you think this is based for getting more people to play? Because Wizards is doing kind of a similar thing with Magic the Gathering, where they're going into a lot of different realms and a different IPs that your traditional Magic the Gathering element would never have done.
Right.
But by bringing in Assassin's Creed, Lord of the Rings, Fallout, all these other Warhammer, it's getting more people to play and more people to spend money on it. And I think that's what they're trying to do, is get more people to buy it.
They're doing something like that, but the problem is I don't feel like what they're doing will get new players. I don't think it's not something that is like, oh, we're incorporating this so new players will come. D&D is what you make of it. But when the rules start to implicate, hey, we're going to remove all these like restrictions on things and give everyone only benefits, I think you're only appeasing the people who already were breaking the system. It feels to me like the people who used to min-max and missed the point of like the story in the game are running things now, and that's just what it feels like. I'm just saying, as the older, my part was opinion, so I've given it to you. I understand your guys' viewpoint, but as like someone coming from older editions and who's watched the game grow, I'm seeing them lessen what made each character fun and unique. It used to be each character sheet was its own story. Now anyone can play anyone, which is great for the sense of getting people to try new things, but if all the new things are the same, I'm just saying, I think we're on a slippery slope that we're about to start losing classes eventually, and it's just going to be, you're an adventurer and you get these skills, and it's going to turn into a skill tree.
Now, you did say that you think the min-maxers are running it. Do you think it's because they have min-maxed their careers?
Possibly.
And that's what we should also do. If you're going to min-max anything, everyone at home, probably min-max your career, because then you can become more powerful and change the things you want. You love Dungeons & Dragons? Min-max the heck out of that resume and get that job.
Well, the Theo method right there?
Yeah, that could be part of that method. That's a new method.
Yeah, and I totally understand what you're saying. I can kind of see both sides and losing that, what some would say is the integrity of the game, even going back, at the history where, your characters die way more, especially now going back to the old ones. So the only thing I will say is what's, lucky for the people who want to go into more, that we have so many more options for homebrew. We have so many options to, incorporate our own rules and kind of do what we want with this. So that's I don't know, for me that's kind of.
And actually on that, and this will just be my final thing, we can move to the next section, but on that specific note, that's kind of where I'm saying I don't think they're winning any favors. I think they have pretty much the people who are going to play, but I've seen so many other people looking for new RPG things, because Wizards of the Coast has done many things like this to their core audience, trying to gain new members. And I feel if you take away your core, is it still the same thing? It's like the ship, where it's, if you have to keep replacing the boards in a ship in like the Smithsonian, is it still the same ship once every board has been replaced?
Lest we forget that this all came out from the announcement a couple years ago that they were going to do this, and like D&D 1, which everyone going into that presser was like, this is going to be where they announce the 6th edition. And they didn't. And they went, we're going to do D&D 1, which isn't a new thing. It is the same, but it's also different. And then we're going to do a new core book, but it's not 6th edition. But it still is 5, but it's going to be different.
Well, see, and to me, that just sounds like a dumb marketing thing. Like, it feels like a cop-out, and that's, I think, a lot of people, why they are feeling flustered with a lot of the stuff that we even hear on the air, off the air. We have arguments on some of, like, the franchises, where they're going, with, like, Rings of Power.
Straight up fist fights, like blood and everything.
Well... I don't know about you guys. I use my cane, but yeah, you know, it's. I feel like we're seeing these changes in the franchises that are all owned, and I understand not everyone's opposed to it, but you gotta understand why the people who are opposed to it are. Is it feels like it's a stab at those people when you start to remove the thing that they have spent most of their life listening to, enjoying, or playing. That's just my take, though. I don't speak for everyone here, and I don't speak for the channel. I'm not looking forward to these changes that I've seen so far, and I don't want to give anything too specific until we see the books out.
And that is a great note, and that is where it takes me to 2 disclaimers. One, we do not know the entirety of the 2024 core rulebook because it is not out yet. It is not out yet. We've only seen a few things in various sources, which I will explain in a second. And my second disclaimer is that, like Kyle said, those are his opinions and thoughts. We will have time for all of our opinions and thoughts in this series, because we are doing 8 to 10, maybe more episodes on this, where we're going to cover everything we know or we think we know about the 2024 core rulebook. Our series will cover race, classes, subclasses, spells, weapon rules, feats, our overall impressions, our hopes, our fears. And, you know, luckily for you guys, you don't have to do all of the research right now, because you are listening to a bunch of nerds and content speedrunners.
We're lore masters, and we delve too heavy.
So we
mined too deep.
So we are planning on doing the work for you right now, and you just have to listen to us. And if you are like us and you want to do one of those, you know, deep dives as well, here are some additional resources for you where you can gain information on the preview, on the upcoming. First off, you can go to the Dungeons & Dragons official YouTube channel. That is at D&D Wizards. Check out their playlist, the 2024 Core Rulebooks Dungeons & Dragons. They have 20 long videos, anywhere from 5 minutes to an hour, and then 48 shorts. These ones will give you great breakdowns, interviews, and information. It's great for looking at the artwork while listening to the reasoning behind the changes. So you'll hear from the game designers Jeremy Crawford and Chris Perkins to artists of Wizards of the Coast like Emi Tanji and Josh Herman. It doesn't give you everything, obviously, because the book is not there, but it gives you a lot, and it's very interesting to hear the dialogue between those. Rick and I, while we were at work doing one of our daily work tasks, we listened to a few of those and watched a few of those, and it was really interesting looking at their new and upcoming art.
Yeah, and to hear some of their rationale from the company's perspective of why they're doing a lot of pencil art for characters to make it feel like you are creating your character from the core book rather than it being finished art. They're like, we want it to show the pencil lines. We want it to look like you are sketching out your character, because that's what you're doing. I was like, that's cool. I never would have thought of that, but it's brilliant. But then they were like, but then we go really in depth in specific detail for the weaponry art. because you want to see exactly what that looks like. It's like, oh,
Yeah,
these people
the weaponry
are
art page was great.
Yeah.
So anyway, I would highly recommend looking at the YouTube channel. D&D Beyond actually has currently over 20 articles detailing changes of the 2024 core rulebook. Their most recent one came out 4 days ago. It's an article called "The Backgrounds and Origin Feats in the 2024 Player's Handbooks." It'll cover the 16 backgrounds that you can choose from and all the feats that go with it. To get to any of those on D&D Beyond, just go to dndbeyond.com/tag/players-handbook. And you can also check out the Unearthed Arcana playtest. Like Kyle had said before, and Rick mentioned, time-wise, this core rulebook has been in playtest for quite some time. The last playtest that they had done, their playtest is finished, and the last playtest that they did, they're no longer receiving feedback for it, but was playtest 8. That was released on November 27th, 2023. Their first playtest was released in August 18th of 2022. So there's 8 playtests, also Cantrips one as well, where you can look at information on races and classes, on what they potentially will have in their 2024 core rulebook. We don't know what they took out based off of feedback. We don't know what they put in addition, but it is nice to see kind of, hey, this is the base of where their recipe was, and they were starting here and removing and adding. And then to get to that one, to get to any Unearthed Arcana playtest, all you need is a D&D Beyond account. You can download the PDFs. It's really great. It's free. And they mention, this is D&D Beyond specifically, this is playtest material only. These game mechanics are in draft form, usable in your D&D campaign, but not refined by full game development and editing. They aren't officially part of the game and aren't permitted in D&D Adventure League events, nor are they available for use on D&D Beyond. Again, they are playtest. They're not official drafts yet. They're not official published yet. They are drafts.
For all you gamers and iOS folks out there, it is in beta.
Yes, exactly. And to get to those, it's really easy. You can search it up on Google, or you can go to dndbeyond.com/sources/dnd/UA. And then last, there are a variety of D&D creators on YouTube that have been given actual material from the core rulebook. So from the upcoming core rulebook, and that is where I learned about some of the upcoming bard changes, which I'm very excited about. And here are some of those creators that you can look at on YouTube. I'm going to start with my favorites, and then I will list everyone else. So Ginny D, Dungeon Dudes, Pointy Hat, D4 D&D Deep Dive, Pixel Circus, Mark Holmes, Dale Kingsmill, Dungeon Dad, Jonathan Perez Galvin, Pack Tactics, Good Time Society. Those are ones that are specifically mentioned on D&D Beyond as official D&D creators.
Those are actually the people I was referring to earlier.
Yep.
Like, what the person I heard that threw the thing was throwing shade. So I was clarifying, we're not throwing shade, but these people do have early material for it. So
yes. So Ginny D, if you are listening, I just want you to know that your content has been inspirational to my dungeoning, and Pointy Hat was exceptional in changing how I looked at travel.
Yeah,
Dungeon Dudes is always really funny. So if you're looking for source material from the 2024 core rulebook that is in preview from those creators, again, they didn't receive everything, but they did receive some pieces, and those are ones that I would highly recommend going to. And as I said before, if you guys continue to listen to this podcast, we are going to preview the core rulebook. Then we are going to, once the core rulebook is out, deep dive into it and have some fun.
I will say also for out there, we've already talked about like character creation and stuff before, but if you're ever looking for good, like you're new to the game and you want to understand role playing and such a little better, I will say Ginny D gives some really good advice on how to get your character more personalized.
Yeah, Ginny D is absolutely great for DMs and players. Now, speaking of the 2024 core rulebook coming out, Rick, where can we get that?
So, The 2024 core rulebook is going to be in 3 parts. You have your player's handbook.
Hollywood got a hold of it. No,
There'd be 7 or 8 parts, Kyle.
Yeah, your player's handbook comes out
2010 anymore.
September 17th, 2024. Woo. The Dungeon Master's Guide comes out November 12th, 2024. Woo. And your Monster Manual comes out February 18th, 2025.
It's too far.
It is really far. Splitting up the release dates, I'm sure, is a corporate decision by the execs in those offices down in Renton, Washington at Wizards. I don't think that's, if I were in charge, how I would have done it. I would have released all 3 of them at once if you want your players to fully experience it. Mm-hmm. So you get split release dates, September, November, February. Right now, pre-orders are active. Like, you can order it for pre-order now. Your best, arguably and subjectively, your best place to pre-order that is from D&D Beyond, like from Wizards directly. You can do a bundle of all 3, so you don't have to worry about trying to go out into the ether and elsewhere to get them later on in dates. You can get all 3 at once, and D&D Beyond also does a bundle where you can get all 3 on both digital and physical. Because for some folks who only buy physical and then go to move to a digital, or if you were only physical player and then the COVID pandemic hit and you had to play digitally, and you found out that all of your purchases of source books did not automatically...
Forever DMs, I know your pain.
Yep, did not transfer over. You can't just sign in and be like, I've bought this one, this one, this one, this one, and this one. Nope. You got to buy them all over again digitally. So that might be your best deal, is to get that bundle. It's a $240 value to get all 6, 3 physical, 3 digital, that D&D Beyond has for $180 with a whole bunch of pre-order bonuses, like a cool little dragon mini, an art book, a bunch of dice, like some cool stuff there. That probably is your best bet.
An actual mini, or is it a digital mini?
I think it's a physical mini.
Okay,
like, you get
I thought I saw it was a digital mini, and when I thought it was a real one, I was excited that I saw that. So
nope, you're right. It's a digital mini.
Okay,
that would have been a really good thing for me to have read before I started talking.
Sorry. Here at Tabletop Talk, I'm kind of the pessimist of the group, so I catch those things pretty fast.
But so D&D Beyond via through Wizards directly right now is probably your best bet. Amazon's got them for pre-order with no benefits to it, but Amazon is available for everything. I checked our town, like we all live in the same little area. Our card shop, our local card shop, does not have pre-orders for it, but they do offer it and D&D stuff when it comes out. So check your local card shops. Bookstores always usually have some type of D&D content. I know our also local bookstore will buy stuff. If you want to buy from local, you can go to the bookstore and be like, hey, you have these source books. You don't have this one that I'm looking for. Ours in town will then buy it for you, have it shipped to them, and then you can purchase from them, which is super great. So maybe they pre-order, and then when it comes in, they get it to you. I don't know, but I tend to like supporting local if I can before going to conglomerates like Amazon.
I will say, I think that's the one thing we all agree on here.
Yeah. But so pre-orders are live. They're ready to go. I'm mixed on pre-ordering. I like knowing that I'm going to have it, but that, what you kind of mentioned earlier, Kyle, about instant gratification, buying something but then not being able to have it right away, feels just super weird to me. But then I know it's ready to go on launch day. But the on their own, if you aren't going to pre-order, they're going to be about $50 each ish, relatively speaking, depending on if you pre-order or if you go get it from somewhere that might have different prices, but relatively about $50 each. D&D Beyond is selling their digital format of the player's hand guide for $30 instead, since it's digital, not a physical thing, which is great pricing.
About time they started to lower the price on the digital ones. Yep. Mm-hmm. I didn't enjoy having to buy all my books on D&D Beyond, but I sucked it up. I did it.
Yep. But so it's ready, it's live. Not live, but pre-orders are live to where you can start gearing up, get your order in, go to those YouTube or article resources that Jeremy told us about, and start preparing for this, so that come September, without a new Dungeon Master guide, we can all just start playing.
There we go.
So we'll see come November once we get to learn some of the Dungeon Master, because for the most part right now, all of the content out there is Player's Handbook based.
Yeah.
I don't think I've really ever seen much from the DM guide or the Monster Manual yet.
A little artwork, but that's it.
But none of like the.
But that seems to be how it goes every time they promote any of the editions. They focus heavily on the Player's Handbook, which, in all reality, is the only book you actually need.
Yeah.
But
I'm curious though that if there is enough opinions out there and enough like reactions, Kyle, kind of in the realm of what you're feeling with this new core book, that if the Dungeon Master Guide is going to have specific sections for here's how to incorporate some of these new things in a way that honors the way to play before, rather than just, hey, here's how you play the new way, here's how to just kind of weave it, and hope I would think that they have like, here's a full-on incorporating this, here's a semi, and then here's how to play it within this new core book, but we play it like traditional 5e. Like that would be a perfect Dungeon Master Guide, because then you could tailor, tinker, and then you could also just weave the three different elements.
The other thing is, like, I do think they are trying to fix some of that, because Kyle Brink was one of the Wizards of the Coast executive producers for this, and he was kind of behind some of the art department, and he ended up getting fired recently because he had actually made a comment that was specifically derived to that it's time, like, he's happy that it's time for old white guys and just white males to move out of the field for everyone else. And Wizards ended up firing him eventually. But this was when we actually, off screen, were talking about some of the images, just to give reference to my fellow hosts here. We may get into a thing about the images at a later point. But I think the hard part is it's finding that in between of how do you progress something without pooping all over, like, the people who've been there and all, because the people who've been there mostly want people to come and play. The moment, though, that you say, well, because you've been here, you're not welcome, that's where a lot of people get upset.
Yeah. And ultimately, this is a game designed to bring people together to play, like you said, like, to play through weaknesses and strengths and see how you, like, work together separately and, like, build upon strengths, weaknesses, and, like, cohesion in that, and build that life skill of, like, adaptability. Like,
well, and when you think about it, even amongst this table in the games we play, the best moments are, like, Trevin's character Houtini in our Golden Shroud saga, sneaking across with all of the stuff on his, like, one-on-one mission where it's like, we need the sneakiest guy, and he's like, got you, and all. And you don't get those moments if everyone can do all the cool things.
Yep.
And just slowly, I'm seeing it looking like, I said, all of it's starting to just level out a little too much.
However, you did mention one of the coolest things was Houtini, and he was a homebrew race that had advantage on stealth rolls.
No, Alan's not homebrew.
Is Alan not homebrew?
No, Alan...
but it is an OP stealth ability that he had.
But that's my point, is that 5e already is really broken, and all I'm seeing are more add-ons to the bonuses. I'm not seeing anything that's adding either negatives, because, like, Drow no longer have dark vision. They actually are removing... not dark vision. They are no longer light sensitive.
More info to come when we do our actual deep dives into
like
changes.
I have just a sneaky feeling that there's going to be some stuff in the DM guide that is going to be able to...
I'm hoping.
Find a way to, not necessarily course correct, but to be able to adapt or change within these rule books that we'll be able to call back.
Right. No, and I want to make that clear. Like, I know there's always ways to counteract it. I just feel when the rules start becoming... everything gives you a multiple plus, that means you have to make the DC, like, ridiculous also. And that's not fun to have to make people, for, like, a simple check, you have to have a DC 20 and all. That should be, like, a hard check. But at this point, I've watched several of us beat that in like the first game and all, and yeah.
Sorry, I set my mic down and I muted myself. That is, so I would say your best valued pick is ordering from D&D Beyond and using that bundle. It might look like a lot to spend $180 on the pre-order, but if you were to try and do it separately, you're spending a whole lot more than that.
Yeah. Thanks, Rick. And that is the end of our podcast today. We've covered all the different sections. Again, keep following us for this series. And we're going to, again, deep dive into race, classes, subclasses, spells, weapon rules, feats, overall impressions, hopes, and fears. Thank you for dealing with our double podcast today.
And on that note, everyone, we love you and safe travels.